"A pardon!" cried the people with one voice. "A pardon!" At this cry, Andrea raised his head. "A pardon for whom?" cried he. Peppino remained breathless. "A pardon for Peppino, called Rocca Priori," said the principal friar, and he passed the paper to the officer commanding the carbineers, who read and returned it to him. "For Peppino!" cried Andrea, who seemed roused from the torpor in which he had been plunged. "Why for him and not for me? We ought to die together. I was promised he should die with me. You have no right to put me to death alone. I will not die alone, I will not!" And he broke from the priests, struggling and raving like a wild beast, and striving desperately to break the cords that bound his hands. The executioner made a sign, and his two assistants leaped from the scaffold and seized him. "What is going on?" asked Franz of the Count, for as all the talk was in the Roman dialect, he had not perfectly understood it. "Do you not see," returned the Count, "that this human creature who is about to die is furious that his fellow sufferer does not perish with him? And, were he able, he would rather tear him to pieces with his teeth and nails than let him enjoy the life he himself is about to be deprived of. Oh, man, race of crocodiles!" cried the Count, extending his clenched hands towards the crowd. "How well do I recognize you there, and that at all times you are worthy of yourselves." Meanwhile, Andrea and the two executioners were struggling on the ground, and he kept exclaiming, "He ought to die! He shall die! I will not die alone!" Look, cried the Count, seizing the young men's hands. "Look, for on my soul it is curious. Here is a man who had resigned himself to his fate, who is going to the scaffold to die, like a coward it is true, but he was about to die without resistance. Do you know what gave him strength? Do you know what consoled him? It was that another partook of his punishment, that another partook of his anguish, that another was about to die before him. Lead 2 sheep to the butcher's, 2 oxen to the slaughterhouse, and make one of them understand that his companion will not die. The sheep will bleat for pleasure, the ox will bellow with joy. But man, whom God created in his own image, man upon whom God has laid his first, his sole commandment, to love his neighbor, man to whom God has given voice to express his thoughts. What is his first cry when he hears his fellow man is saved? A blasphemy. Honor to man, this masterpiece of nature, this king of creation. Okay, if yesterday threw me through a loop regarding Dante, I don't even know where to friggin' start today, folks. What the actual HE double hockey stick is Dante saying here? What is he saying? Okay, breaking it down. Peppino gets his pardon. Andrea goes crazy with jealousy, desperation, whatever you want to call it, and starts raving like a madman, trying to resist his own execution. Okay, that's what's happening. Franz doesn't understand what's going on because of the Roman dialect, and so he asks the Count to give him some context. I want to slow this down because we don't get a lot of insight into Dante's psychology these days. This feels very telling, and I don't mean to luxuriate in it, but I feel like we need to take this point by point. What's he saying first? Do you not see that Andrea... I'm going to paraphrase here because we don't need to just read the passage again. Do you not see that Andrea, who is about to die, is angry that Peppino isn't going to die with him? And because of that revelation, Andrea is raving mad and would rather tear Peppino to pieces with his teeth and nails, as he says, than to watch him receive a reprieve while Andrea himself is still going to die. Okay. That's the first thing he says. Then he starts to layer in a sort of insight into his philosophy. So this is the first part I want to really examine. And I'm going to read this again. Quote, "Oh, man, race of crocodiles, how well do I recognize you there, and at all times you are worthy of yourselves." What in the hell do we think that means? Yesterday, I used the term crocodile tears, and I think I accidentally stumbled onto part of Dante's philosophy here. Why crocodiles? What does he mean by crocodiles? And what is he saying about humanity? Man, race of crocodiles. Humans are nothing but crocodiles. What do crocodiles represent here? Cold-bloodedness, crocodile tears, so false emotion, masking cruelty, predation, like they are just waiting to chomp at the bit. They're bloodlusty, maybe. I mean, setting aside what crocodiles actually are and their metaphorical use of them. How well do I recognize you there? So Dante's saying, I can see through your mask. You present yourself as human, but you're really no better than bloodthirsty animals, or reptiles, sorry. And that all times you are worthy of yourself. Now, again, we're going to go deep on this. The line, how well do I recognize you there? That's important, I think, because he's not surprised by this. He's basically saying this is confirming what I already know, what I have already experienced. His experience with Villefort and being imprisoned and all the people responsible for that, Danglars, Fernand, Caderousse to a degree, are all culprits in painting out what he expects of humanity. I already know you're crocodiles. I've seen it myself. I am a living example of what happens from your cruelty. So when he says that at all times you are worthy of yourselves, this is just irony, right? It's a dark joke and not a haha joke, but he is saying you're consistent with your nature. Of course you're crocodiles. You might present yourself to be compassionate and humane, but really you're being consistent with your nature. I've seen it and I continue to see it. And in this moment, you are just reconfirming that pattern. What is it saying about Dante here? He is coming from a place of seeing human nature as fundamentally corrupt. That's dark. Dante has been himself corrupted, or at least his view of humanity has. What's more, and the dangerous side of this is like, this is just reaffirming his preset beliefs. Would he even be open to a situation in which someone could surprise him with compassion? I'm wondering if that's going to be something that is challenged of him later in this story. But we're not done yet. We got the whole last paragraph to still break down. So this is going to be kind of a long episode. Sorry, folks. He goes on to kind of psychoanalyze Andrea, but in doing so, makes a dangerous leap into using his psychoanalysis of Andrea to reaffirm his belief in humanity. Well, his understanding of humanity. Look, for on my soul it is curious. He's saying, pay attention. This is something to study. When I talked about all of those examples, cross cultures of where I traveled and saw every method of execution, this is what I'm talking about. That's what he's saying here. He goes on, here's a man who has resigned himself to his fate, who is going to the scaffold to die, like a coward who is going to the scaffold to die without resistance. Okay, so he's just pointing to the example, but then goes on to say, do you know what gave him strength? Strength to face his death even as a coward, but facing it without resistance. What gave him strength was that another was going to partake of this punishment with him. And he creates this comparison here that is really chilling when you dig into it. Because he goes on to talk about the sheep and the oxen, if you lead two of each to the butcher or the slaughterhouse. And he says, one of them understand that his companion will not die. The sheep will bleat, the ox will bellow with joy. They don't, basically saying animals don't understand or care if their fellow is about to live. Basically saying that animals, the sheep, the oxen, will respond with positive emotion. I don't know how you prove that, Dante, but you'd have to be a mind reader. You'd have to be Dr. Dolittle for understanding how animals are going to respond, let alone understand that their companion is about to live when they're about to die. It seems like you're overcompensating for your own philosophy here. But he goes on to say, which that all is of lesser importance than what he goes on to say, but by re-centering it on man. But man, what is his first cry? A blasphemy. The comparison being that in his mind at least, animals are happy to see that their companions are to live, even if they are still facing death, whereas man doesn't match that standard at the exact moment when it matters. Like, the average person is self-centered in their own existence. Man does not care about man. Man cares about self. And that in itself is dark and disturbing as a philosophy on humanity, but he goes even one step further by saying that man, this core idea of man that he has solidified in his mind is an aberration in the eyes of God himself. By saying man, upon whom God has laid his first commandment to love his neighbor, God who has given man a voice to express his thoughts, what is the first thing that he hears when his fellow man is going to be saved, even if he's going to die, is a blasphemy to that man that's going to live. And that last line, honor to man, this masterpiece of nature, this king of the creation, he's knocking down any pedestal of ideals that any argument for humanity might be placing upon itself. This is another one of those, ironic statements, the most bitter and black of irony. Honor to man, this masterpiece of nature, the king of the creation. And more than that, I mean, this king of the creation, it almost feels like a blight to God himself. Like, what good is man if this is what man does? And if man is made in the image of God, and God allows man to speak and express himself, and this is what they choose to express, then what good is God? It's in human nature to destroy ourselves. Not just me, but you too. If I'm going, you're going with me, is what he's saying here. That's what humans' inherent nature is. And if you reject that, then humanity becomes violent and enraged, and yet they claim moral superiority over the animals. They react with envy and hatred. And so Dante is placing humans, and maybe even God, on a moral spectrum below animals and creatures. This is the result, this philosophy is the result of what Dante has studied in people all these years. I think he believes that humanity is corrupt by nature, but one thing he might be missing is that this moral framework he's developing for himself might be too constricted by his own experience. His own suffering has corrupted his view of humanity. And because he escaped, because he came into immense wealth, there's never been an opportunity for salvation of humanity in his own eyes. It's all superficial and what you make of it yourself in this world. Okay, I'm gonna end that nonsense there, because I could go on and on and on, and I don't want to bore you. But to end on just maybe a more optimistic note, like, you probably won't see it in the final episode here, but my last words to end on a optimistic note, then gave me a long pause as I suddenly was overcome with anxiety. And I want to be honest with you all. I know this isn't really the forefront of the show, but pulling apart Dante's worldview, I think, affected me more than I realized. It's easy, I think, to fall into that mindset. I don't want to get didactic here. I want to give you my honest reaction to what is going on. As I was talking about it, I was kind of condemning Dante's perspective on humanity. And then as I tried to think of an optimistic way to end the episode, I realized, like, I think I'm not all the time, but I see some of that in myself right now. And I don't like that. And I don't feel like I believe that at the core of my being, but it's hard to live in the world we do right now and not believe that the evidence we see day after day doesn't make what Dante's saying here true. It doesn't. It feels like it's an optical illusion of sorts. You see it, so you tend to believe it, but the flip side of it is you don't see the day-to-day compassion for humanity that humanity has for itself and for animals and for the future of humanity and the respect of the past of humanity. You don't see that because it's not as spectacle. It's not as illustrative as the big negative stuff. Or at least it's not given as much emphasis in the stories we tell, in the things we see day in and day out. So I don't know if this is an optimistic way to end this or if we even need one. But if I'm going to end this episode on an optimistic note, because I know a lot of you listen to this first thing in the morning, and I don't want to give you that negative energy for the day. Like, I think, as saccharine as it maybe sounds, like, look for stories of compassion today. Like, just once, one day, and I'm talking to myself here too, one day out of the week, just, it doesn't even have to be a recurring thing. Just like once, reject the muck, the shit, the negativity, the story that's being repeated to ourselves over and over and over again, that we don't care about ourselves, we don't care about each other. Reject it for a day, and look for the stories of compassion and the opportunities to express the compassion. Okay, I am getting didactic, and I didn't intend to, but I needed to talk that out for myself. Otherwise, I was going to go into, I think, an anxiety attack. So, here we are, warts and all. You know what? And because I've taken up so much of your time today, I'm not even going to go into the normal Patreon stuff. It's supporter month. You can go to patreon.com/gruntworkpod to get a bunch of free stuff. And that's all I'll say for today. I'm going to leave this long episode there. I appreciate all of you being here, listening, and the good stuff that you put out in the world. Thank you for being you. The Countdown of Monte Cristo is part of the Gruntwork Podcast Network. This show is produced, edited, and hosted by Landon Solano. The original text of The Count of Monte Cristo by Alexander Dumas. Theme song by Magic Solo. If you want to support the show and others like it, visit patreon.com/gruntworkpod. Thank you for listening. See you tomorrow.